My boss threatened to ruin my career. He didn't know I recorded every threat. I was standing in my boss's office when he slammed the door behind me and hissed, "If you ever go over my head again, I'll make sure you never work in this city." The sound of the door echoed in my chest. I was 52 years old, not some scared intern, but my knees still felt weak. His face was red, eyes sharp, like he enjoyed watching fear land. I had reported a safety issue. That was it. A loose railing. A real risk. People could get hurt. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You think anyone will believe you over me?" The room smelled like coffee and power. I nodded even though my throat burned. I needed to get out. I needed air. When I reached for the handle, my hand shook so badly, I had to use both hands. That was the moment I knew my career was under attack. And if you want to know how this ends, hit subscribe for more true revenge stories. I walked back to my desk holding my notebook tight against my chest so no one could see my hands shake. My fingers felt numb, like they didn't belong to me. Around me, keyboards clicked and phones rang like nothing had happened. I sat down slowly, breathing through my nose the way my doctor once taught me. All I had done was follow the rules. The company manual said safety issues must be reported. I had done that. I had even waited a week, hoping someone else would notice first. When they didn't, I spoke up. Now my boss had threatened my whole life. My job paid my rent. My job paid for my medication. At my age, starting over wasn't easy or quick. I opened my notebook and stared at my handwriting. The words blurred. I wondered how many times he had done this before. I wondered how many people stayed quiet just to survive. That fear sat heavy in my chest, but something else was there too. Anger, slow and waking. Later that afternoon, while I stood at the copier pretending to fix a paper jam, someone touched my elbow. It was Denise from accounting. She leaned in close and spoke so softly, I almost missed it. "Be careful," she whispered. I looked at her, confused. "About what?" She glanced around, then met my eyes. "About him. He's done this before." My stomach dropped. "I saw you come out of his office," she said. "You looked like I did 2 years ago." "What happened?" I asked. She swallowed. "I went to HR. He said I was difficult, emotional. They believed him." The copier beeped, loud and sudden. Denise stepped back like we hadn't said anything at all. I stood there frozen. HR always takes a side. The words echoed in my head. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was a pattern. A trap. As I walked back to my desk, I felt smaller but also clearer. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. And I needed to be smarter than him. The next morning, I logged in early, hoping to get ahead of my work. My project folder was gone. Every file, months of notes, reports, and timelines vanished from the shared drive. I stared at the screen, clicking refresh again and again. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. I walked straight to his office. "My files are missing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't even look up. Maybe you didn't save properly. I knew that wasn't true. I saved everything twice. He smiled then, small and sharp, like he had won a game. When I returned to my desk, people avoided my eyes. Someone had already started whispering. I could feel it. That afternoon, an email went out saying my project was on hold. No explanation. Just my name attached to silence. That was when fear turned into resolve. Accidents don't smirk. This was done on purpose. At 4 o'clock, I got a calendar invite from him. Subject line: performance review. The meeting was set for the next morning. Just the two of us. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the fridge through the wall. My chest felt tight. Every bad thought took turns. What if he fired me? What if he lied? What if no one believed me? In the morning, I wore my plain blue sweater and sensible shoes. I wanted to look calm. Forgettable. When I walked into his office, the door closed behind me with a click that made my skin crawl. He stood up slowly, locking it. "We need to talk," he said. I nodded, sitting down carefully. My purse rested on my lap, heavier than usual. Inside it, my phone pressed against my leg. I didn't know it yet, but this meeting would change everything. He leaned forward until I could smell his cologne. If you resign quietly, he said, I'll give you a good reference. If you fight me, I'll destroy your reputation. My stomach twisted, but I kept my face still. I stared at the framed awards on his wall and wondered how many people he'd crushed to earn them. I didn't do anything wrong, I said. My voice sounded far away, even to me. He laughed softly. Wrong doesn't matter. Power does. He talked like my life was a small thing he could fold and throw away. He told me no one would hire a problem woman my age. He said the word woman like it was an insult. I nodded slowly, pretending to think. My hand slipped into my purse, fingers brushing my phone. When I stood to leave, my legs felt weak, but my mind felt sharp. He thought he had scared me into silence. What he didn't know was that my phone had been recording every word. I walked out of his office with my head down, like I was ashamed. Inside, my heart was racing. My phone felt hot in my hand, like it knew what it had just captured. I sat in my car and locked the doors. Then I pressed play. His voice filled the small space.
Calm, cool, clear.
I'll destroy your reputation. Hearing it back made my chest ache, but it also grounded me. This wasn't my imagination. This was proof. I recorded again that night at home, whispering notes to myself.
Dates. Times.
What he said. How he smiled. I wrote everything down in a notebook with a blue cover. I cried then, hard and shaking, the kind of crying that comes when fear finally lets go. But when the tears slowed, something changed. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had his words. And words, once saved, can't be taken back. The next few days felt unreal. I went to work like normal, answered emails, smiled when spoken to. Inside, I was breaking. I listened to the recording every night, sometimes just to remind myself I hadn't dreamed it. Other times, to build courage. Each word burned, but it also strengthened me. One night, sitting alone in my car after work, I replayed his threats again and again. My hands shook so badly, I had to pull over. I cried there, parked on a quiet street, tears dropping onto my coat. I thought about my age, my bills, my years of loyalty. I thought about how easy it would be for him to erase me. Then I wiped my face and sat up straight. He thought fear would break me. He was wrong. Fear had shown me exactly what I needed to fight back. I filed the HR complaint on a Monday morning. I used clear words. I attached dates. I didn't include the recordings yet.
I wanted to see who they would protect.
The HR manager smiled tightly and nodded. We'll look into it, she said. Days passed. Nothing changed. My boss walked by my desk whistling. My name was removed from meetings. Emails stopped coming. People spoke to me like I was already gone. I followed up with HR. No response. That silence told me everything. They weren't investigating. They were waiting for me to give up. I went home that night and backed up my recordings again. Cloud storage. USB. Email drafts saved but not sent. If they wanted quiet, they wouldn't get it. I wasn't asking anymore. I was preparing. The rumors started quietly. Then they grew teeth. Someone said I was unstable. Someone else said I had yelled at my boss. A coworker asked gently if I was doing okay. My inbox filled with pity. Thinking of you. Hope everything works out. I sat at my desk feeling erased. He had turned the story upside down, just like Denise warned me. That evening, when I opened my apartment door, a manila envelope slid across the floor. No return address. Just my name, written neatly. Inside were copies of complaints. Other women. Different years. Same boss. Same outcome. Closed without action. My hands went cold. I wasn't the first. I sat on the floor and spread the papers around me like pieces of a broken mirror. That was when I understood. This wasn't just about saving myself. It was about stopping him. I didn't sleep much after finding the envelope. I kept thinking about the women whose names were on those papers.
Different handwriting.
Same ending. I made coffee before sunrise and read every page again.
Dates.
Words. Excuses. All of them led back to him. At work, I kept my head down. My boss walked past me once and paused. "You still here?" he asked, smiling like a joke. "Yes," I said. That afternoon, Denise slipped into my chair when no one was looking. "You got something, didn't you?" she whispered. I nodded once. Her eyes filled with tears. "He buried us," she said. That night, I spread everything out on my table. My recordings, their complaints, my notes. The picture was clear now. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't weak. I was standing in the middle of a pattern that needed to end. The next day, I didn't go to HR. I didn't confront him. I watched. I noticed how he spoke softer to men, louder to women. I noticed how he joked after meetings, like nothing could touch him. At lunch, I sat alone and made a list. Names of people who had left. Names of people who stayed quiet. I realized something heavy and important. If I walked away, he would keep doing this. If I stayed silent, I would be helping him. That scared me more than losing my job. That afternoon, a senior manager I barely knew stopped by my desk. She looked around, then leaned in. "Record everything," she whispered. "He's untouchable, but not invincible." My heart jumped. Someone else saw it. Someone else believed me. That was the moment fear stopped leading. Purpose stepped in instead. I agreed to meet him again about a project update. My stomach churned as I walked to his office, but my phone was already recording. He closed the door. Again. "You're making this hard," he said. "I just want to work," I replied. He laughed. "Do you want to play dirty? I have friends in HR." I let the silence stretch. "Do you?" I asked calmly. He leaned back, surprised. "Careful, Mabel." I nodded and left without another word. At my desk, I sent him an email summarizing our talk. Short, polite, clear. He replied within minutes. "Delete this. Nothing said today should be written." I stared at the screen, hands steady. That message felt like a gift. Proof stacked on proof. He was digging deeper and he didn't even know it. Things moved fast after that. My hours were cut. My access removed. My name erased from schedules. He told the team I was on my way out. I smiled and kept recording. I met with a union rep, a quiet woman with sharp eyes. She listened without interrupting. "If you can prove retaliation," she said, "you'll own this place." That night, I organized everything. 10 hours of audio. Files labeled. Dates clear. I uploaded copies to the cloud under a simple name, Safety Review Evidence. I slept better than I had in weeks. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was ready. He called me into the boardroom on Friday. People were there. He raised his voice. "You're done here," he said. I smiled softly. That night, I placed a USB drive into an envelope addressed to corporate HR and legal. The next morning, he strutted through the office like a king. By noon, everything changed. By Monday morning, the office felt tight, like a storm waiting to break. My boss was called upstairs before his first coffee. He didn't look worried. He winked at someone as he walked past, confident as ever. He didn't come back down for hours. Whispers spread fast. People leaned over cubicle walls. Phones stayed face down. I kept working, my screen steady even though my heart was loud. Around noon, 2 people I had never seen before walked in. Corporate HR, headquarters. Their badges were different. Their faces were calm and unreadable. They asked for access to records. 5 years' worth. Complaints. Emails. Exit interviews. My boss's office door stayed closed. I could hear his voice through the wall, raised and sharp. For the first time, fear wasn't sitting on my shoulders. It had moved across the room. At 2 o'clock, his email account shut down. Mid-sentence. Someone gasped. Someone else quietly stood up and left the room. I stayed seated, hands folded, breathing slow. A message popped up on my screen from corporate HR. "Please meet with us tomorrow morning." My pulse thundered, but I didn't panic. This was the moment I had prepared for. That night, I barely slept, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I replayed every step in my head, checking for holes. There were none. I had truth. And truth doesn't rush. It waits. The conference room was cold. 3 executives sat at the table. A lawyer, the HR director. They thanked me for bringing this forward. Then they played the recording. I'll ruin you. The sound filled the room. One executive closed his eyes. Another muttered, "That's enough." They didn't ask if it was real. They asked how long it had been happening. I told them everything. When I left, my legs felt light. That afternoon, security escorted him out. He didn't look at me. Corporate sent an email. 0 tolerance for intimidation. My role was reinstated. Plus a raise. Plus an apology signed by the CEO. Justice had a sound. It was silence where his power used to be. The women from the envelope reached out. One by one. "You did what we couldn't." A magazine called. They wanted my story. Whistleblower brings down powerful manager. I spoke at a safety forum. "Record everything," I said. Truth has a voice. That night, he texted from a new number. "You ruined me." I replied once.
No.
"You recorded yourself." Then I blocked him. I went home and deleted the files one by one. Justice didn't need archives anymore. My fear was gone. My power stayed. My nameplate went up outside a bigger office. I closed the door and sat down, breathing in quiet. That evening, I lit a candle and opened a book. For the first time, the silence felt like mine. He thought words could destroy me. He never realized I was recording his downfall. And if you want more true revenge stories where justice wins, hit subscribe. The lawyer called me the next morning and asked how I was holding up. His voice was calm, practiced. I told him the truth. I felt tired, but steady. He explained what would happen next. Paperwork, statements, protection. He said the company wanted this handled cleanly. I understood what that meant. They wanted the problem gone quietly. But quiet didn't mean hidden anymore. When I walked into the office, people looked at me differently. Some with respect. Some with guilt. A few with fear. I didn't enjoy it, but I accepted it. Denise hugged me in the hallway. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded. Words felt too small. That afternoon, I cleaned out my old desk. Not because I was leaving, but because I didn't want reminders of who I had been there. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was staying on my own terms. Corporate asked me to help review policies. I almost laughed at that. The same system that ignored us now wanted my input. I agreed anyway. Not for them, but for the next woman. We sat in a glass room while executives took notes. I spoke slowly, clearly. I explained how fear works, how silence spreads, how power hides behind smiles. No one interrupted me. After the meeting, I went back to my office and closed the door. My hands shook then, the way they hadn't in weeks. I let it happen. That night, I dreamed of the envelope again. But this time the papers were blank. I woke up knowing something had shifted. The past no longer owned me. I was no longer carrying everyone else's silence. I had set it down. The article came out on a Thursday. My phone buzzed all day. Old coworkers. Old friends. Even my sister called crying. "I'm proud of you," she said. That mattered more than the headline. At work, a few people avoided me, but more stopped to say thank you. One woman squeezed my hand and said, "Because of you, I spoke up today." I sat in my office after hours, lights dim, city glowing outside the window. I thought about how close I came to quitting quietly, how easy it would have been to disappear. Instead, I stayed, not to be brave, but because I finally believed I was worth protecting. That belief felt stronger than fear ever had. Weeks passed. The office settled into a new rhythm. His name stopped being mentioned. His shadow faded. HR sent updates. Policies changed. Training scheduled. It wasn't perfect, but it was movement. One evening, I found the blue notebook in my drawer. The one with all my notes. I flipped through it slowly. Then I tore out the pages and fed them into the shredder. Not because they didn't matter, but because I didn't need them anymore. I walked home under a pink sky, breathing in cool air. For the first time in years, My shoulders felt light. Justice hadn't made me loud. It had made me calm. I sat alone that night with a cup of tea and listened to the quiet. No ringing phone. No dread about tomorrow. I thought about the girl I used to be, the woman I became, the strength I didn't know I had until it was tested. He had tried to erase me. Instead, he showed me my power. And I carried that forward, steady and unafraid. The next week, corporate asked me to sit in on interviews. They wanted context, patterns, history. I agreed, even though each story felt like pressing on a bruise. One woman spoke with her hands folded tight. Another stared at the floor. Different ages, same fear.
Same man.
I told myself to stay calm, but inside I burned. Not with rage anymore, but with resolve. This wasn't gossip or drama. This was damage. After each interview, the executives looked quieter. He wasn't just a problem. He was a liability they had ignored for years. That night, I wrote everything down again, not for proof this time, but for memory. I didn't want to forget how close this came to swallowing me whole. Justice wasn't loud. It was careful. It took notes. And it kept going long after the headlines faded. One morning, I arrived to find his name removed from internal systems completely. No profile. No calendar. No trace. People noticed. Someone whispered, "He's really gone." I nodded but didn't smile. His absence didn't feel like victory. It felt like space.
Space to breathe.
Space to work without flinching. Corporate sent another email. Mandatory training. New reporting lines. Outside auditors. This time, it wasn't a performance. I watched managers shift in their seats. Power behaves differently when it knows it's being watched. At lunch, Denise sat with me openly for the first time in years. We talked about nothing important. That felt important. Fear had ruled this place quietly for too long. Now it was learning how to leave. HR asked if I wanted to move teams. A fresh start, they said carefully. I thought about it overnight. In the morning, I said no. I didn't need to run from a place I had helped change. Leaving would have felt like agreeing I didn't belong. I did belong. I had earned that. They respected my choice. That alone told me things were different now. That afternoon, I trained a new hire. She was young, nervous, eager to please. I made sure to tell her where the reporting lines were, how to document, how to protect herself. She smiled with relief. That was the real win. Not promotions or praise, but prevention. A month later, the legal process wrapped quietly.
Settlements.
Non-disclosures. Corporate language smoothing sharp edges. I signed what I needed to sign and walked away clean. He tried to reach me once more through a third party. An apology request. I declined. Some conversations don't deserve reopening. That evening, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on. I felt older than before, but also lighter. Like something heavy had been set down for good. I hadn't won by destroying him. I had won by refusing to be destroyed. That felt better than revenge. When I spoke again at a small workplace forum, I kept my words simple. I'm not brave, I said. I was scared. I just stopped letting fear decide.
People nodded.
Some cried. Afterward, a woman squeezed my hand and whispered, "You gave me courage." I went home that night and slept deeply without dreams. The story was no longer about him. It was about what happens when silence breaks. After the forum, life slowed into something steady. I went to work, did my job, came home, slept. No emergencies. No dread waiting at the door. It felt strange how calm things were after so much chaos. One afternoon, I found an old email from years ago, sent by my boss when I first joined the team. It praised my work, called me reliable. I almost laughed. People can change, I realized, but not always for the better. I deleted the email and closed my inbox. I didn't need proof anymore. What mattered was the present. I noticed how meetings felt different now. Voices were softer. Interruptions stopped. People listened. Power hadn't disappeared. It had been corrected. That mattered. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't counting the hours until I could leave. I was building something again. Denise invited me to lunch one Friday. We sat outside, sharing a sandwich, watching people pass by. I almost quit, she said quietly. I know, I replied. She smiled sadly. You changed that. I shook my head. We changed that. We talked about normal things.
Books.
Weather.
Her new hobby.
It felt good not to whisper. At work, a notice went up about a new anonymous reporting system. Real protections. Real follow-up. I stood there reading it longer than I needed to. This was what accountability looked like.
Slow. Boring.
Necessary. That evening, I went home and cooked dinner instead of ordering takeout. Small choices felt big again. I was no longer surviving a storm. I was living in the calm after. One morning, a package arrived at my desk. Inside was a small plaque from corporate, for integrity and courage. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't feel courageous. I felt tired, but I also felt proud. I placed it in a drawer instead of on the wall. I didn't need a reminder every day. I carried it already. Later, a new manager stopped by to introduce herself. She asked how I liked to work, what support I needed.
No one had asked me that in years.
As she walked away, I realized something simple and powerful. This was how work was supposed to feel. Safe, respectful, human. It had taken one threat to wake me up, but it had given me my voice back. That was worth everything. On a quiet Sunday, I cleaned my apartment from top to bottom. I opened windows, let light in, threw out old papers. At the back of a drawer, I found the USB drive. I held it for a moment, then snapped it clean in half and dropped it in the trash. I didn't need it anymore. Fear had shaped me for too long. I wasn't carrying it forward. That afternoon, I took a long walk, feeling the sun on my face. I noticed small things. A dog chasing leaves. A child laughing. Life kept moving, gentle and ordinary. That was the best kind of victory. Not loud. Not cruel. Just free. Months later, someone new joined the company. She was older, like me. Nervous, but capable. I saw myself in her careful smiles. I made sure she knew my door was always open. Because power doesn't need to threaten when it's healthy. And silence isn't safety. As I locked my office one evening, I felt something settle deep inside me. My boss had tried to ruin my career. Instead, he showed me my strength. And I carried that forward, steady, unafraid, and finally at peace. A year passed quietly. No drama. No sudden emails that made my stomach drop. I learned how peace feels when it lasts longer than a moment. At work, my voice carried weight now. When I spoke, people listened, not because of what happened before, but because I trusted myself again. One afternoon, I was asked to mentor a small group about workplace safety. I stood at the front of the room and saw faces watching closely. I told them the truth. Speak early. Write things down. Protect yourselves. My voice didn't shake. Afterward, I sat alone in my office and felt something warm settle in my chest. Pride, maybe. Or relief. I had been scared to be seen for so long. Now I understood that being seen wasn't dangerous. Being silent was. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I knew who it was before I read it. You ruined me, it said. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel guilty. I felt done. I typed one reply.
No.
You recorded yourself. Then I blocked the number and turned my phone face down. That was the last time his shadow crossed my day. I realized then that closure doesn't come from apologies or regret. It comes from choosing yourself again and again until it feels natural. I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the city slow into night. His power over me was gone, and it wasn't coming back. Spring came softly that year. I opened my windows and let the air move through my apartment. I cleaned without rushing. I laughed more easily. I slept deeply. Fear had once shaped every decision I made. Now it barely whispered. At work, a young woman stopped by my office and said, "They told me to come to you if I ever felt uncomfortable." I nodded. Anytime. After she left, I sat quietly for a moment. This was the ripple. This was the part no article captured. Not revenge. Not punishment. Protection. That felt better than anything else. On my desk sat my nameplate, clean and simple. I ran my fingers over the letters one morning and smiled. I hadn't lost my career. I had claimed it. Looking back, I saw how close I came to believing his threats. How easy it would have been to disappear. Instead, I stayed. I spoke. And the world didn't end. It shifted. I stood taller now, not louder, just steadier. I no longer needed proof to trust myself. That trust was my real promotion. Some nights, I thought about the moment he slammed the door and promised to ruin me. That threat had ended my fear, and it had begun my power. He believed words could erase me. He never realized I was listening, recording, remembering. I wasn't his victim. I was the witness to his downfall. And I walked forward knowing this. No one ever gets to silence me again. If this story stayed with you, like the video, subscribe for more powerful revenge stories, and tell me in the comments what part hit you the hardest.